The rain poured down in sheets, turning the New York City streets into slick rivers of chaos. Marcus Rivera squinted through the windshield of his yellow cab, the wipers working overtime against the relentless downpour. He felt the weight of the night pressing on him, both from the sky and the ticking clock on the dash. Every minute that passed meant another fare missed, another dollar lost. He needed this job, his family depended on it. As he navigated through the maze of honking horns and blaring lights, he spotted her. A woman stood under a flickering street lamp, her silhouette fragile against the storm. Her hands cradled her belly, and she swayed slightly, as if the world around her had become too much to bear. His heart clenched. He couldn't just drive by. Slowing to a stop, he rolled down the window, rainwater streaming down the sides of the car. "You okay, miss?" He called out, his voice barely cutting through the din of the storm. She looked up, her face a mix of relief and desperation. I need to get to the hospital," she gasped, her breath hitching. "My wallet was stolen, and I can't pay." Marcus's instinct kicked in harder than the rain. "Get in," he said, motioning for her to hurry. "I'll take you." As she slid into the back seat, he caught a glimpse of her eyes, wide and filled with fear. "Thank you so much," she murmured, gripping the seat as the cab lurched forward. He could feel the urgency in the air, an electric charge that made every second count. "Just breathe," he said, trying to keep his tone calm while weaving through the traffic. "We're going to get you there." The hospital loomed ahead, its fluorescent lights cutting through the fog of the storm. As he pulled up to the entrance, a wave of relief washed over her face. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice thick with gratitude. But before she could step out, he grabbed her hand, his eyes locking onto hers. "Just promise me one thing," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "You'll take care of yourself and that baby. You're going to be okay." She nodded, tears sparkling in the harsh light. "I will. I promise." As she dashed into the building, Marcus felt a swell of warmth in his chest, a flicker of hope amid his own worries. But that hope quickly dimmed when he saw the reflection of headlights in his rearview mirror. A passenger, clearly agitated, was waving his hands, yelling about time wasted. Marcus's heart sank. He knew the risks of making exceptions. The next morning, the news hit him like a punch to the gut. He was called into the office, the manager's face stony as he recounted the passenger's complaint. "You can't just give rides for free, Marcus. It's against company policy," he said, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, but we have to let you go." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him, the weight of his choices crashing down. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? Yet here he was, jobless and lost, grappling with the uncertainty of what came next. Before we dive deeper into Marcus's journey, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us share incredible stories of kindness and resilience with more people. So please, subscribe now. The rain had finally abated, leaving the streets of New York glistening under the early morning sun. Marcus Rivera stood on the corner of 34th and 8th, the clamor of the city waking around him. He watched as the yellow cabs whizzed by, their drivers laughing with one another and chatting animatedly with passengers. The sounds felt distant to him now, like echoes of a life he once knew, a life that had come crashing down with a single act of kindness. He rubbed the back of his neck, trying to shake off the tension that had settled in since his firing. The warmth of the sun was a cruel contrast to the chill that had seeped into his bones. Marcus had always taken pride in his work, in being a reliable taxi driver who knew the city like the back of his hand. But now here he was, a man without a job, grappling with the weight of what he had lost and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. "Hey, you looking for a ride?" A fellow driver called out, pulling up beside him. The man's expression was sympathetic, but Marcus could see the curiosity behind his eyes. They all knew about the complaint. They all knew he'd been let go for bending the rules. "Just thinking," Marcus replied, forcing a smile that felt heavy on his lips. He watched the other man drive off, shaking his head. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? Helping that pregnant woman, Ava, was instinctual. But the bills were piling up at home, and his kids' laughter was a bitter reminder of the responsibilities he could no longer meet. As he stood there, lost in thought, a notification pinged on his phone. He glanced down and saw a message from an old friend. "Saw the article about you. The one about the pregnant lady. Crazy how people are talking." He clicked the link, and his heart raced as he read the headline, "Taxi driver's heartwarming gesture goes viral." Below it, a picture of him with Ava, her eyes wide with gratitude, captured the moment he had felt most alive. The article detailed Ava's ordeal, her wallet stolen, her fear palpable as she fought against the tide of time. But what struck him was the way she had described him, not just as a driver but as a hero. His heart swelled, but it was quickly followed by a wave of doubt. Hero? He hadn't saved anyone. He had just done what he thought was right. Suddenly, a wave of voices broke through his reverie. A small crowd had gathered on the opposite sidewalk, their phones raised, capturing the moment for social media. He could hear snippets of their conversation, praising him for his kindness, sharing their own stories of compassion. But the admiration felt suffocating. He didn't want to be a spectacle, he wanted to provide for his family. Just then, a woman approached him, her expression earnest.
Marcus Rivera.
She asked, her voice laced with excitement. I'm a reporter with the New York Times. Can I ask you a few questions? He hesitated, feeling the weight of the attention settle on him like a heavy coat. Sure, he said, barely able to mask the uncertainty in his voice. As she peppered him with questions about the night he had picked up Ava, he struggled to articulate his feelings. I just wanted to help her. I didn't think about the consequences, he admitted, the words tumbling out. I couldn't let her suffer alone. The reporter nodded, her eyes brightening. That's exactly why your story resonates with so many people. You showed humanity in a city that often feels cold and indifferent. Marcus listened, half engaged, as she spoke about how the community was rallying behind him, sharing his story and offering support. But as the conversation wrapped up, a gnawing fear took hold of him. What if this newfound attention didn't translate to tangible help? What if he remained stuck at this crossroads, unable to provide for his family? His mind raced with possibilities. What if he could leverage this moment, turn it into something real? But what? He was no entrepreneur. He was just a driver, a simple man trying to make ends meet. As he walked away from the crowd, the sun shining brightly overhead, he felt an unfamiliar spark ignite within him. Maybe there was something he could do. Maybe he could create a service that would carry forward the kindness he had shown to Ava, a way to help others in emergencies, just like he had helped her. A community cab, he thought, a way to give back while also ensuring his family's future. The idea took root, and though doubt lingered like a shadow, he felt a flicker of hope. It was time to turn the page, not just for himself but for those who needed a helping hand. A new journey awaited him, and perhaps this was just the beginning. The sun hung high over New York City, its beams cutting through the remnants of last night's storm. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, his mind swirling with thoughts of Ava and the article that had catapulted him into the city's collective consciousness. The crowd had dissipated, but the buzz of his unexpected fame lingered like the scent of rain-soaked asphalt. He replayed the reporter's words in his mind. You showed humanity in a city that often feels cold and indifferent. It was a fine sentiment, but it felt like a weight rather than a badge of honor. He hadn't set out to be a hero, he had simply reacted to someone in need. Now standing there, he felt the tide of public opinion shifting around him, and the attention felt more like a spotlight than a warm embrace. As he turned to walk away, his phone buzzed again, this time vibrating insistently in his pocket. Pulling it out, he saw a flurry of messages from friends and strangers alike. You're an inspiration. Let me know if you need help. You should start a charity. The words blurred together, amplifying the pressure that had begun to build in his chest. But then, one message caught his eye, and his heart raced. It was from Ava. I'd love to talk. Can we meet? He stared at the screen, a mixture of hope and apprehension coursing through him. What did she want? Did she feel guilty for the trouble his kindness had caused him? Did she want to thank him again? Or was there something more? After a moment's hesitation, he responded, agreeing to meet at a nearby cafe. The thought of facing her stirred a flurry of conflicting emotions. She had become a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in his life, yet she was also the reason he had acted in the first place. When he stepped into the cafe, the comforting aroma of coffee enveloped him, but it did little to ease his anxiety. He spotted Ava at a corner table, her eyes lighting up as she saw him. She looked different from the night he'd rushed her to the hospital, no longer a stranger lost in distress, but a woman with purpose and clarity. Marcus, she greeted, her voice warm, yet tinged with urgency. Thank you for coming. Of course, he replied, taking a seat across from her. I've seen the article you wrote. It's a lot. I didn't expect it to blow up like this, she admitted, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. But it's more than just a story about a cab driver. It's about kindness, and how we can all make a difference, no matter how small our actions seem. He leaned back, crossing his arms. I just did what anyone would do. I didn't think about the consequences. Ava's gaze intensified. But that's the point, Marcus. Your choice had a ripple effect. People are inspired by you. They want to help. And that's why I'm here. Help. He echoed, a frown creasing his brow. I don't need charity. I need a job. She hesitated, her expression softening. What if I told you that my husband and I are looking for a private driver? Someone trustworthy, someone who understands the pulse of this city. You'd have stability, and you could still be there for your family. The offer hung in the air between them, tantalizing yet heavy. Marcus's heart raced. It was everything he needed, financial security, a chance to rebuild. But it felt wrong, as if accepting it would diminish his act of kindness. I'm not sure, he stammered. I don't want to take advantage of what happened. Ava leaned forward, her voice earnest. Marcus, you're not taking advantage. You're accepting an opportunity that could change your life. You deserve it. Your story deserves to continue. He felt the weight of her words, but doubt gnawed at him. What kind of legacy would he leave behind if he simply accepted a handout from a wealthy couple? The thought of being the hero in someone else's story while losing control of his own felt suffocating. Maybe there's another way, he said slowly, his mind racing. What if I started something of my own? A service that helps people like you, who find themselves in emergencies. A community cab, where no one has to worry about payment in a crisis. Ava's eyes widened, and for a moment, the bustling cafe faded around them. That's brilliant, she exclaimed. You could build something meaningful, and I'd help. I can connect you with resources, people who want to support this idea. A flicker of hope ignited within him. The prospect of creating his own path felt exhilarating, yet daunting. But what if it fails? He asked, vulnerability creeping into his voice. Then you try again. It's about the journey, Marcus, not just the destination, she replied, her conviction unwavering. You already took a leap of faith. Now it's time to trust yourself. In that moment, something shifted within Marcus. He realized that he didn't have to accept Ava's offer to validate his kindness. He could forge his own way, one that embraced his values and his community. The stakes had never been higher. It was about more than just his job. It was about creating a legacy that would resonate beyond his own needs. As they sat in the cafe, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of the city, Marcus felt the weight of his choices settle into clarity. It wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to embrace the challenge. He had a chance to turn his moment of kindness into a movement, and perhaps, just perhaps, he could inspire others to act with compassion in a city that so desperately needed it. With a newfound resolve, he turned to Ava, his voice steady. Let's do this. The cafe bustled with life, the clinks of cups and the murmur of conversations providing a soundtrack to Marcus's internal conflict. As Ava leaned in closer, her enthusiasm palpable, Marcus felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The idea of starting a community cab was exhilarating, but the stakes were rising faster than he could grasp. Marcus, think about it, Ava urged, her voice steady and persuasive. People are already talking about you. If you launch the service, it could be a beacon of hope for those who are struggling. You could change lives. As she spoke, Marcus's mind raced. He envisioned the faces of the low-income families he often saw in the city, those who needed a ride but couldn't afford it, those who might be in a desperate situation just like Ava had been. But as the vision of possibility bloomed, a stark reality loomed just as large. What about my family? He interrupted, his voice tight. I need to provide for them right now. I can't afford to gamble with something that could fail. The thought of his children's disappointment flashed through his mind. Little Lena, with her bright smile, and Marco, who looked up to him as a hero. Ava's expression softened, but her determination remained unyielding. What if we could get some initial funding? There are organizations that support community initiatives. You could use your story to rally support. But you have to act quickly. The longer you wait, the less momentum you'll have. The urgency in her voice sent a shiver down his spine. The city outside was still waking up, but his own time was running short. Bills were piling up at home, Every day he spent without a job was another day he risked falling behind. The thought of his family not having enough to eat clawed at him, and the weight of his decision became heavier still. "I can't just leap into this," he replied, shaking his head. "What if it all goes wrong? What if I end up deeper in debt? I can't let my family down." Ava leaned back, her eyes piercing through him. "But what if it goes right? What if you create something that not only supports your family, but also uplifts an entire community? You have the chance to be a catalyst for change." He took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of coffee and possibility. "What if I fail?" He asked again, the words a whisper of fear. "What if I let everyone down?" The cafe door swung open, and the bell jingled, drawing his attention. A group of men entered, their laughter loud and carefree, oblivious to the weight of his decision. As they walked to the counter, Marcus caught sight of a familiar face, the manager from the taxi company he'd been fired from. The man noticed him, and their eyes locked for a moment, the recognition thick in the air. The manager smirked, and Marcus felt a rush of anger mixed with humiliation. Here he was, grappling with a life-altering decision, while the man who had fired him strolled in like nothing had changed. "Look at you, Marcus," the manager called over, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Out of a job and still trying to play the hero, I see. How's that working out for you?" Marcus clenched his fists under the table, the taunt igniting a fire inside him. "I'm working on something better," he snapped back, surprising even himself. "Something that can actually help people." The manager's laughter echoed in the cafe, but it didn't faze Marcus. Instead, it solidified his resolve. He turned back to Ava, his voice steadying. "You're right. I can't let fear dictate my choices. If I fail, I fail, but I can't sit back and do nothing." Ava's eyes sparkled with approval. "That's the spirit. Let's get started. We'll need to gather support, but I have connections." But just as the idea began to solidify, a nagging doubt crept back in. What if I can't do it? What if my past? What if I can't shake the stigma of being fired? "Every setback is a setup for a comeback," Ava said firmly, her tone brooking no argument. "You've already shown the kind of person you are. Now it's time to prove it to the world, and to yourself." The cafe felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls were closing in, and Marcus's heart raced at the thought of taking this leap. He glanced out the window at the busy street, the yellow cabs darting past like a swarm of bees, each one representing lives being changed through small acts of kindness. He could be a part of that, a driver not just for fares but for a mission. But the pressure to act quickly tightened around him. "Okay. Let's do it," he said, a newfound determination igniting his spirit. "But we have to move fast. I can't afford to lose any more time." Ava nodded eagerly, her excitement infectious. "I'll help you draft a proposal today. We can reach out to organizations by afternoon." As Marcus rose from the table, the weight of his decision hung in the air. He was stepping into uncharted territory, a world filled with uncertainty and potential. But as he left the cafe, he felt a sense of urgency pushing him forward, a ticking clock driving him to make a choice that could change not just his life, but the lives of others as well. He couldn't linger in the shadows of doubt any longer. It was time to embrace the future, to transform his moment of kindness into a movement that would echo throughout the city. He took a deep breath, the smell of rain and hope mingling in his lungs. The time for action was now. Marcus stepped out of the cafe, the bright sunlight contrasting sharply with the stormy thoughts swirling in his mind. The city buzzed around him as he navigated the streets of New York, each step feeling like a commitment to the unknown. He had made the decision to launch Community Cab, but the enormity of it weighed heavily on his shoulders. As he walked, he replayed the conversation with Ava in his head, her voice echoing with encouragement. "You can't be afraid to fail," she had said. "Every setback is a setup for a comeback." Yet the specter of his recent firing loomed large, a constant reminder of the risks he was about to take. What if he couldn't secure funding? What if no one supported his mission? Determined, he pulled out his phone, a plan forming in his mind. He needed to reach out to the organizations Ava had mentioned. They were his lifeline, the bridge between his dreams and reality. Taking a deep breath, he began tapping out an email to a local charity that focused on transportation for low-income families. They had to believe in his vision. But as he typed, doubt began to creep in again. What if they turned him down? What if they dismissed his idea as just another pipe dream? He paused, fingers hovering over the screen, and glanced up at the bustling street ahead. A line of yellow cabs sped by, their drivers immersed in their routines. Each one was a reminder of the life he had just left behind, but also of the potential that lay ahead. "Come on, Marcus," he muttered to himself, shaking off the negativity. He hit send and felt a mix of relief and trepidation wash over him. There was no turning back now. He had to keep moving forward. As if the universe was responding to his resolve, his phone buzzed almost immediately with a reply. The charity expressed interest in his idea and wanted to meet to discuss it further. A rush of adrenaline surged through him. This was it, the first step toward turning his vision into a reality. But he knew he had to act quickly. The meeting was set for just 2 days away. Pushing through the crowd, he felt the urgency of the moment settle deep in his bones. He needed to gather support, to rally people around his cause before the meeting. Time was ticking, and every hour that passed felt like a lost opportunity. He needed to make his story heard, not just through the articles that were circulating but through real, tangible connections with people who believed in his mission. He spotted a community center across the street, its vibrant colors drawing him in like a beacon. This was where he could start, where he could reach out to families who might benefit from his service. As he crossed the street, he mentally prepared himself. He would share his story, explain his vision, and connect with those who needed it most. Inside the center, the atmosphere hummed with life. Kids played in the corner, laughter mixing with the chatter of adults discussing the day's events. Marcus approached a group gathered around a table, their faces lighting up as he introduced himself. "I'm Marcus, and I have an idea that could help our community," he began, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart. He shared Ava's story, his own, and the concept of community cab, a service that would provide rides to those in emergency situations, free of charge. "Imagine being able to get to the hospital without worrying about how you'll pay," he said, his passion igniting the room. "I want to create a network of drivers willing to help those in need. It's about kindness, about lifting each other up in difficult times." The room fell silent, eyes fixed on him. He could see the wheels turning in their minds, the hope beginning to spark. "What do you think?" he asked, the weight of their response palpable. A woman in the back raised her hand, her expression thoughtful. "I think it's a wonderful idea, but how will you fund it?" Marcus took a breath, ready for this question. "That's why I'm reaching out to organizations for support. But I need your help too. If we can spread the word, if people see the need for this service, we can make it happen." The conversation flowed, ideas bouncing around the table like a game of catch. But time was short, and he could feel the urgency building. His meeting with the charity was looming, and he had to make an impact before then. As he wrapped up the discussion and exchanged contact information, a sense of possibility washed over him. He had taken the first steps toward making his dream a reality, but the clock was ticking. He needed momentum, and he needed it fast. By the time he left the community center, his heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear. The stakes were higher than ever. He had committed to this path, and now he had to see it through, not just for himself, but for everyone who could benefit from a little kindness in this vast, chaotic city. The countdown had begun, and the urgency fueled his resolve. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The confrontation with his fears, with his past, was inevitable, but he wouldn't shy away from it any longer. He had a mission now, and he would see it through. No more hesitation. It was time to turn kindness into action. Marcus stood in front of the community center, his heart racing as he mentally prepared for the meeting with the charity. He had spent the past 2 days rallying support, sharing his idea for community cab, and the enthusiasm he had ignited in the community felt like a lifeline. But with the meeting looming, anxiety coiled tightly in his chest. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of the stakes. He wasn't just fighting for a job, he was fighting for a vision that could impact lives. He imagined the faces of those who had shared their stories with him, mothers in distress, families in crisis. He needed this to work. As he entered the charity office, the air was thick with expectation. A panel of 3 people awaited him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The head of the panel, a woman named Linda, gestured for him to sit. "Marcus, we're intrigued by your idea, but we need to understand how you plan to make this operational." He launched into his pitch, outlining the concept of community cab and how it would provide free rides in emergencies. He spoke passionately about the need for such a service in their community, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. But as he finished, he felt the weight of their scrutiny. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you need to realize that this isn't just a feel-good project, Linda said, her tone firm. We're looking for sustainability. How will you fund this long-term? What's your plan for drivers, insurance, maintenance? Marcus's heart sank. He had prepared for questions, but the reality of the logistics crashed over him like a wave. I was hoping to get initial funding to start, he stammered. I have a network of drivers willing to volunteer, but I realize now it might not be enough. Linda nodded, her expression reading both concern and disappointment. You need a solid business plan. If we're going to back you, we need to see that you've thought this through. You have 1 week to present a detailed proposal. The weight of her words hit him like a punch to the gut. 1 week. He had hoped for immediate support, not an ultimatum that felt like a noose tightening around his neck. He felt the walls closing in, the pressure building. I understand, he replied, forcing the words out. I'll get to work on it. As he left the meeting, a sense of dread settled over him. He had no experience creating a business plan, and the clock was ticking. He had poured his heart into this vision, and the thought of failing weighed heavily on him. What if he couldn't deliver? What if he let everyone down? The next few days became a blur of sleepless nights and frantic research. He spent every spare moment drafting a business plan, reaching out to potential sponsors, and connecting with drivers willing to join his cause. But with each passing hour, the pressure mounted. His family needed him, and every moment he devoted to the project felt like time stolen from them. One evening, exhausted and overwhelmed, he sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. His wife, Maria, entered, concern etched across her face. Marcus, you've been working yourself to the bone. You need to rest. I can't, he replied, frustration spilling over. If I don't get this right, we'll lose everything. I can't go back to being just another unemployed driver. Maria sat down beside him, placing a hand on his back. I believe in you, but you can't do this alone. You need to lean on us too. Let us help. He met her gaze, and in that moment, he realized the cost of his ambition. He was so focused on proving himself that he had neglected the very support system that had always been there for him. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice cracking. I'm just scared. She squeezed his shoulder, an unspoken promise of solidarity. We're in this together, Marcus. Whatever happens, we'll face it as a family. Buoyed by her words, he returned to his planning with renewed vigor. The next day, he organized a community meeting, inviting everyone who had expressed interest in community cab. The room buzzed with energy as he shared his vision, but he also laid bare the challenges ahead. I need help with this business plan, he admitted. This isn't just my dream anymore, it's ours. Hands shot up around the room, and ideas flowed like a river. As they brainstormed together, Marcus felt the burden lift. They began to outline potential funding sources, roles for drivers, and how to manage the logistics. It was a collaborative effort, and the support from the community filled him with hope. But just when things began to feel manageable, an unexpected challenge arose. One of the drivers he had recruited, Miguel, approached him after the meeting. Marcus, I have to tell you something, he said, his tone serious. I can't commit to this project anymore. I'm facing some personal issues, and I don't think I can handle the pressure. Marcus's heart sank. Miguel had been one of his strongest supporters, and losing him felt like a step backward. I understand, Miguel. But is there anything we can do to help? No, it's something I have to deal with on my own, he replied, his eyes downcast. I just wanted you to know before things go further. As Miguel walked away, Marcus felt the weight of uncertainty creeping back in. Each setback felt like a personal failure, a reminder of what could go wrong. But he couldn't afford to dwell on it. He had to keep pushing forward for his family, for everyone who believed in community cab. The day of the charity's deadline arrived, and Marcus stood in front of the panel again, this time with a polished business plan in hand. But as he began to present, he could see doubt flickering in their eyes. What will you do if you can't secure the funding? Linda pressed. I'll find a way, Marcus responded, determination hardening his voice. I understand the risks, but I've seen the need firsthand. I can't ignore it. I won't. This isn't just a dream, it's a necessity for our community. The panel exchanged glances, and Marcus could feel the tension in the room. He knew he was risking everything by pushing this hard. The stakes had never been higher, and he could feel the personal cost weighing down on him. Finally, Linda spoke. "We appreciate your passion, Marcus. But we need to see a clear path to sustainability. If we fund this, we need to know you can keep it running." "I promise you," he said, his voice steady but his heart racing. "I won't let you down. I'll make this work, not just for me, but for everyone who needs it." As he left the meeting, a mix of hope and fear coursed through him. The panel had agreed to consider his proposal, but the stakes felt higher than ever. He had put everything on the line, and now it was time to face the consequences of his choices. He walked home slowly, the weight of the day settling heavily on his shoulders. He had gambled everything on a vision of kindness, and now he had to see it through. The road ahead was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure: he would fight for his community, no matter the cost. As Marcus sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the chaos of unfinished plans and crumpled papers, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the precipice of something monumental. His family's laughter echoed from the living room, a reminder of what he was striving for. But the weight of uncertainty loomed larger than ever. He had poured his heart into Community Cab, yet doubts clawed at him. What if he failed? What if he couldn't deliver on the promise he had made to the community, to Ava, and most importantly, to his family? That evening, as he stared blankly at his notes, a flash of inspiration struck him. He recalled a moment from his childhood when his mother had taken him to a local shelter to volunteer. He remembered the faces of those who had been at their most vulnerable, how a simple act of kindness had transformed their day, if only for a moment. He had felt their gratitude, their relief, and in that moment, he realized that kindness was never just transactional, it was relational. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place. The community wasn't just a group of individuals needing rides. It was a tapestry of lives intertwined, each thread representing a story, a struggle, a triumph. He wasn't merely starting a service. He was creating a movement, a network of people willing to lift each other up. In that moment of clarity, the revelation hit him like a jolt of electricity. Community Cab was more than just a transportation service. It was a lifeline, a way to connect those in need with those willing to help. It was about community, compassion, and the shared understanding that everyone has their struggles, but together, they could navigate them. Marcus sprang to his feet, his heart racing with renewed purpose. He realized he didn't need to have everything figured out to start. He just needed to invite others to join him in the journey. He could reach out to those he had met at the community center, gather their stories, and weave them into the fabric of his proposal. The strength of Community Cab would come from the connections they forged, not just between drivers and passengers, but among neighbors and friends who stood together in times of crisis. With newfound determination, Marcus gathered his notes, his mind racing with ideas. He would not just present a business plan but a vision for a community united by kindness. He would show them that Community Cab was about more than rides. It was about hope, resilience, and the undeniable power of human connection. As he sat down to write, he felt the weight of doubt lift, replaced by the exhilarating possibility of transformation. He was no longer just a taxi driver striving to reclaim his life. He was a catalyst for change, ready to ignite the spark of compassion in a city that so desperately needed it. This was not just his journey, it was theirs, and together, they would create something beautiful. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the New York skyline in hues of orange and pink, Marcus stood outside the community center, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. The launch of Community Cab was more than just a dream realized. It was a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. That evening, he watched as families gathered around the center, their faces glowing with hope and connection. The laughter of children mingled with the chatter of adults, creating a symphony of joy that filled the air. It was a stark contrast to the anxiety he had felt just weeks before, when the weight of uncertainty threatened to crush him. He spotted Ava across the parking lot, her smile radiant as she approached. "You did it, Marcus," she said, her eyes filled with pride. "The community is buzzing about this. You've turned your vision into a reality." He chuckled softly, still absorbing the enormity of it all. "I couldn't have done it without everyone's support. This isn't just mine, it belongs to all of us." Ava nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's a reminder that kindness can ripple through our lives, change the narrative. You've shown that one act of compassion can lead to something incredible." As they stood there, watching the community come together, Marcus felt a swell of gratitude. It wasn't just about providing transportation, it was about forging connections, fostering understanding, and building a legacy of care. Each ride would carry with it a story, a shared moment of humanity that transcended the chaos of the city. In that moment, he understood the true impact of his choice to help Ava that rainy night. It had ignited a spark that now illuminated a path for others. He thought of his children waiting at home, and the warmth spread through him knowing they would grow up witnessing the power of compassion in action. As the first passengers stepped into the newly branded community cab, Marcus smiled, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. This was more than just a service, it was a movement. And as he prepared to drive into the night, he realized that the journey ahead was filled with endless possibilities, each one a chance to uplift, to connect, and to remind the world that kindness could flourish, even in the heart of a bustling city. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt not just hope, but certainty. Together, they would make a difference.